So you're going to be the first presenter,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Oh, you've got this professional thing, have you?
Yes. So we'll get a full HD 1080p live stream on YouTube with good quality audio.
Excellent.
So you're going to be first who going to test it.
Does he need to use this as well then for the audience here?
Yes, that's for the audience, and he's going to just
There won't be any
broadcast.
interference between these two mics, right? Will you tweet the link to at 3Dcamp so that I can retweet it for live stream?
Okay, I'm not sure if I'm working in my
So it's already going on YouTube, is it? From your account on YouTube? From on YouTube?
No, from 3Dcamp Dublin.
Oh really? On YouTube?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll tweet you the...
Okay, good man.
So I just need this then? That's just for the...
That's just for his live stream, so you can, and we can both be heard on the live stream, I guess, at the moment. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So this is for the crowd here.
Oh, okay. So we need both.
We're ready to go, really, aren't we?
I think so.
I'm going to give a very brief introduction to every speaker, really, then. So
No problem.
say as much as
No problem at all, yeah.
we will try and keep it to about 12 minutes.
Yes, I've got, yep.
I think we're 1 minute to go because just to keep it moving.
Not a problem.
Good evening. Hello, everybody. Good evening. Thank you all for coming along tonight. It's great to see such a big crowd here again. We haven't actually had an event, I think, since February, which is probably our longest break in a while. So we're glad to know that you haven't all forgotten about us. One of the reasons, actually, we didn't have an event the last few months is because our next event called AR/VR Innovate was on in May. I think Alex and Jimmy might be here, so I just want to say congratulations to them on, putting a really an internationally favoured AR/VR event on the map now for Ireland. And if you didn't make it this year, I strongly encourage you to try and get there next year. There's a lot of international visitors. We even had an exchange event back home to Liverpool a few of us since then. So it's great to build up the networking industry here. So tonight's format is going to be pretty much the same as what we've had the last few events. We're spoiled by choice in terms of speakers, which unfortunately means that the list is long in terms of people that I want to get through, and we haven't had enough events to do so. So unfortunately we have to rush our speakers a bit tonight. We have 4 people speaking, and we can only give them about 12 minutes, maybe 13.
Stretch it out.
So unfortunately we don't have time for Q&A after the speaker, but I strongly encourage you the second half of the evening, that's networking, demos, food, chat, gather around them and have a proper conversation with them there. They'd love to talk with you. Okay? So I'll introduce you to our first speaker, David Traynor. David is the CEO of Sim2Real, based in Belfast. They create personal, immersive learning using VR, AR, MR, mixed reality, for a number of training sectors, with medicine and healthcare being the largest of these. David is also the co-chair of the VR, AR Association's Industry Committee for Training, and this evening he's going to talk about training medical professionals to analyze microscopic data sets in mixed reality. So please welcome David.
Thanks very much, James. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming along. I've been long overdue to come down from Belfast to attend one of these events, and thankfully now, thanks to James and so on, I've finally got the chance. So tonight's topic, as James mentioned, is looking at a system we've developed to help train medical professionals who are involved in medical analysis, that is taking medical and biological samples, be that blood, tissue, bone, whatever, passing it through a very high-powered, high-resolution digital microscope, and then having to analyze or interpret the results Is a disease present or not? Is a new drug working or not? So it's looking at using mixed reality as a way of adding to the traditional way that this type of medical training is done. So a little bit about us. I think James covered it pretty well. But yes, we are Belfast-based. We do focus on creating software and media platforms for what we call personal immersive learning. So learning because we're obviously education and training oriented. Immersive obviously brings in the various XR type of training presentation. The personal part's quite interesting because we actually combine presenting information using XR with actually generating content using machine learning and artificial intelligence. And we do that to create a very personalized training experience for each individual. So rather than one-size-fits-all content or everyone receiving the same pre-authored VR or AR scene, we actually have an AI-based technology that composes different media assets together to create lots of variations on a training theme based on data that's known about each trainee. So it's like having a personalized training course authored on the fly just for you. So the kind of workflow that we were looking to augment is something like this, where, as I say, a medical sample passes through a very high resolution digital microscope or camera. That data then has to be visualized in some human meaningful way. And then typically for training purposes, the trainees have to isolate or analyze particular features of that model or that visualization. So it could be looking for the presence or absence of a certain type of cell or a certain type of structure that may indicate disease or drug efficacy or failure. Very often this visualization is very complex because of the very high resolution of the equipment that produces it. So usually there's a process by which that visualization has to be abstracted or simplified so that the main features stand out for the human trainee who are trying to interpret it. And typically, this is more like a training process point, traditionally this is carried out in a small interactive group. So you'll have something like 5 people, 1 instructor, 4 trainees, who carry out this type of training as a collaborative exercise in the same physical space. And that was quite important to us in terms of trying to work out the type of immersive experience that would naturally fit with the way they work to date. So that feeds into why do we settle on mixed reality as the means of adding to this training process. And I've listed some of the points here. So obviously we have the rich 3D visualization aspects. The fact that the training can be made more engaging and knowledge retention can be enhanced through interactivity, which often isn't the case with the physical training materials that they have to use currently. In mixed reality, we can facilitate things like highlighting or extracting components of interest from the model, from the visualization that comes off the microscope. Although we're providing this mixed reality addition to the training, the trainees do still have to use a certain amount of physical training materials as well. So because they need this mixture of virtual and real-world components to the training, that's why we went for mixed reality as opposed to something like virtual reality, because they still need access to certain physical components to carry this out. And finally then, because this is carried out in a collaborative group-based scenario, we need, as I say, realistic real-time collaboration. So we need the concept of a group of people, each with a headset, but sharing a common shared model and set of virtual content. So that led us to the choice of hardware. So we've implemented this in, using HoloLens. And it's really for the combination of reasons listed here. In particular, we'd had good results in the past from using multiple HoloLens headsets in a shared scenario, which is one of the key requirements for us in creating this particular application. Now, generally, we are, to a reasonable extent, hardware agnostic, so we're not saying this is the only piece of hardware capable of doing that, and very often this is a moving target as headsets evolve, but that was the set of decisions that led us to HoloLens. I've got a quick example here, which I'm going to show you on video. I do have the HoloLens down with me, so I can show you a couple of examples, of different examples afterwards. So this project's in collaboration with a medical company who are also Belfast-based called Andor. So if anyone's heard of them, they actually manufacture medical cameras and conventional 3D image processing software for the medical industry. So this is a very much a natural fit or complement to the kind of work and the kind of products that they make. So I'll just start the video here. So you can see here that it's a fairly simple menu-based system. One of the other aspects that we had to take into account was the fact that trainees wouldn't be familiar with the typical HoloLens UI, particularly the gesture-based interface. So we had to keep it that there was no more than 2 types of gesture that were used to control this. So the combination of an icon-based menu system and the gesture, we were able to get that down to just requiring the traditional HoloLens click gesture and the click drag. And it gets us these various manipulations which allow scaling, rotation, viewing from different angles. You can see here that we can also highlight, the little eye icons here let you highlight or extract different parts of the model. So when the model data comes in, the various points on it, which corresponds to different parts of the sample, actually go through a classification process. So that's how they get these different color codes that are in the model. They correspond to different structures or different cells within the overall sample, and they can be extracted and analyzed independently through the UI. So in terms of where we are currently with this, it's very much a proof of concept training system. Andor have actually demoed this at a fairly prestigious neuroscience conference in Washington towards the end of last year. So if you come over and see any of the examples later on, you'll see they've got a very heavy neuroscience content. So you'll see lots of neurons, spinal cords, and lovely things like that of an evening. So interestingly, it got a very good reception from certainly the neuroscience community and the people in that community who are responsible for training junior analysts to carry out this type of training, at least in the neuroscience field. So with further development planned in conjunction with Andor throughout the rest of this year. So watch this space, and we're hoping that there'll be more to report in the very near future. Contact details there. So more than happy to talk to anyone tonight, or if you want to contact me later on, please feel free to do so. I would love to hear from you. Thanks very much. Not okay for time? Okay.
Put it somewhere.
Thanks very much, David. And please do make sure to catch David at the networking side of the evening if you have questions for him. And if you haven't tried the HoloLens yet, folks, please definitely try that as well. It really is an incredible device.
Yep.
So our next speaker tonight is Donica Ryan. Donica is the lead technology officer of surgical affairs at the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland. And the timing of this presentation is perfect because just this month, the new surgical trainees starting in Royal College of Surgeons will be the first group to experience VR as part of their core surgical training delivery. So this evening, Donica will talk about how VR made it into Ireland's surgical training program. Please give Donica a welcome.
Thanks, James. So just to go over what I'm going to cover this evening, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of background about myself so you can kind of see where the opinions are coming from, some of the challenges around surgical training, and really I want to tell you about what we've tried, what worked, and what we've learned, and hopefully there might be some lessons in there for people who are trying to get into the area and generate content for their own environment. So very quickly, my own background is I qualified in '92 in computer science when a laptop looked like this and a mobile phone looked like this. Windows came on 6 floppy disks that we used to have to buy in the sweet shop in college. So after doing a couple of years in financial software, when the boredom absolutely became overwhelming, I moved into video games development. So I worked on some PlayStation, Xbox games. And then finally my last job before the RCSI was I spent 9 years working in a company that was a spin out of Trinity making the simulator there, which was a kind of mix of AR and full-on graphics at the time. So now my current role is just looking at what kind of technology we can exploit for surgical training. So we've got a very busy group of trainees who have not very much time, so we're always looking for advantages and how we can optimize their time when they're in with us for training. So surgical simulation is, there are quite a few challenges around with it. If we take, we're always being compared to the airline industry, so we talk about how good the simulators are. So this is a simulation, or is it? I don't know, maybe, for a cockpit, and this is one for surgery. I don't think anybody would, be able to be convinced that they're actually working on a patient there, but that's just to illustrate the gap there is at the moment in the technology. So it's a hugely complex, like here we're simulating man-made objects, and here we're trying to simulate stuff where we don't even fully understand the human body. And just as a little bit of an aside, I just wanted to point out this cover of Time magazine, and this to me is the absolute worst thing they could put on the cover of Time magazine to illustrate virtual reality. They have a guy simulating walking on the beach. Surely it would be easier to actually just walk on the beach. Like where VR comes in is for these situations like the airplane and for surgery, and like there's fantastic opportunities to put you in a situation that would be difficult to simulate. And I've no idea why he's not wearing any shoes. Okay, this is as bad as the VR simulator for garden work that was on The Simpsons. Okay, so just to kind of to put a little comparison here, so you'll be hearing from Brad later from Marion Surgical, and they're doing amazing stuff on the surgical simulation. So a dedicated company doing superb stuff. So we're on the other end. We are delivering training here, and there's just myself and Conor Dunphy there in the office, and we kind of do this on not quite a part-time basis, but we have to fit this in with everything else. So we're not trying to invent anything. We're looking at what we can take off the shelf and use. So small budget, small team. So this is the lesson for people who want to, VR isn't your core business, but you're looking to do it as an augmentation of what you're doing. So this is some of the equipment we already have for training surgeons. So we've lots of different simulators, all these ones that you see here for various different specialties. And we've a new lab that we bring in the trainees, and they can work on kind of biological materials. So just one of the first things I wanted to talk about was the decision tree. So if you're looking at what you use, I mean, like the 3 different areas we look at in the college are VR, AR, and AI. But then you go down to the first decision tree, and you've got, do I use the Oculus, the Gear VR, the Oculus Go, the Google Cardboard, and then underneath that there's a whole other set of decisions. Do I make it an interactive game, or do I make it a 3D, 360 video and a passive experience? So when you kind of lay them all out together, you can see there's a huge amount of decisions to be made. So for example, just to trace it through that, because we have done something in all those. So there are all the different paths we've taken through VR, AR, and AI. And then if we take away the ones that just didn't work, we're left with those. So there's a huge amount of decisions, and it costs money, and it costs time, and it costs effort to go down all of these. So it's something to consider before diving into something. Really try and find out as much as you can. Just before I go into the different things that we've done, I'm going to show you a video because it's just easier to see it visually there. So this is just a snippet of all the different ones we've done. So this first one is Gear VR. This is an interactive one where you get to make decisions for this, a pneumothorax emergency. And that was released on the App Store. So this was done in conjunction with Immersive VR in Waterford. So this next one is where we took laparoscopic kit. You see the presenter there. This was on RTE last year. She's using a real laparoscopic kit, so a trainer that they use. But what we did was we, sorry, I'll come back to that. This is, again, using the Oculus. Again, we developed this ourselves for looking at human anatomy and doing a game. And this one is where we are doing a virtual tour of the new building. And the final one then is, this goes on. And the last one is, so this is 360 surgery. So this is a surgery that took place out in Tala Hospital, and that screen that's floating there was added in post-production. There's a 2D camera at the operation site as well. So I'll just go back to the presentation now and just... So these were the 5 different things that we tried. So the first one, the Gear VR, the pneumothorax simulators, this took about 6 months to develop, and we released it and it's had 150,000 downloads. But the problem was, because of what it cost, which was reasonable amount, but 6 months. So based on that, we would get 2 of these done every year if we had the money and the resources. But that's just not that practical for producing content, and it's just not a realistic one. So for the 6-month effort, we got exactly one situation to simulate. The second one, as I said, so the box on the left there, that's a kit they use. It's a physical kit with that simulates laparoscopic or keyhole surgery. And we just basically mapped the feed from the video camera into the Oculus Rift, and basically mapped that on as if it was a screen in a real operating theatre, and we used an operating theatre model. So again, we got this fully working, and you can see that guy sitting down there is a vascular surgeon, and he can see what they're doing. But the reality was that it probably didn't add a huge amount of educational material other than it's immersive and so on. So that kind of remains a tech demo. We did an Oculus Rift game where you could kind of use your Xbox controller and look at the different parts of the human body and be asked to identify different things. And again, that kind of remained as a tech demo. The VR tour we did here, this is just taking a 360 camera and taking it around the building and putting in interactive videos. This is one that we did use. So for the promotions in the new building, or for when the students come in for days, we can kind of give them a Google Cardboard set and give them a tour of the building or a tour of the hospital. This is very quick to put out. The filming for, we'll say, the entire building was 1 day, and then to bring it all together is probably about another day. So there's kind of off-the-shelf software to do that. So that was something very feasible and very doable, and I think there's quite a lot of opportunities in that. The other one was 360 surgery. So again, there's no development required. Basically, this involves Connor going out to a surgery, filming it, so hanging the 360 camera off the lights above the patient. The surgeon works in the college with us, so he's familiar with the setup. And then we can kind of take the laparoscopic feed and post that up, and have you see on the right hand side, you can see the 2D capture of the port site. So you can kind of bring all those things together, but then you've got a couple of options. You can give this to people with a Gear VR and it'll work right away. You can give it to them on a Google Cardboard and it'll work right away. And also you can give it to them on YouTube, and they can just use the mouse to look around it. So it was very scalable. So out of those, apart from the kind of 360 tour and so on, which we do use quite a lot and we use it for promotions, the 360 surgery is actually now on our curriculum. So that's part of the content we deliver to the trainees, and they can kind of consume that on, just video. They can consume it on their phone, on the cardboard. So we have the lap chole is fully released. We've the lap hernia nearly finished, and an open hernia that we're doing, and that actually covers all the operations they do in year 1 of surgical training. So their exam, I'm probably short on time to kind of show a demo of those 1 minute. Okay, the other thing just to kind of mention a few people here, because none of these things are a success in isolation. NDTP, who were extremely supportive and have been over the journey of trying out these VR things and have invested in the future of healthcare, and which is so important now because the future of medicine is going to have to be very heavily involved with this technology. VRAI, who have been great partners with us, who really are experts in this area. Tyndall, again, doing the likes of the glove tracking and so on, and VR Education, who did the pneumothorax simulation. And just a few quick lessons, hopefully, to come away with. First one is whatever you're building has to be reliable. You'll just kill your product stone dead if it's anyway flaky. So, for example, we would have given the Google Cardboard to like 200 students, and we've about 5 minutes to give it to them. If your stuff doesn't work perfectly first time, it's such a pity. The other one is the decisions, just to think long and hard, like you know, what are you going to, and they're very much based on your group. If you're putting stuff out to the global community, great, put on the Oculus Rift. If you're trying to give it to 200 people, you need, at a particular conference or something, you need to think about the Google Cardboard, and you need to think about whatever you're doing, if it's an ambitious project, how will you do the third one and the fourth one and the fifth one. The content, this is the thing that always gets underestimated. We get very excited about the technology, but the actual content and how we make it and how we deliver it, just is one to just be really mindful of, and definitely take help with the experts where you can. And the distribution, like I said, you need to kind of gauge the platform you're putting this on based on the group you're doing. So, for example, for us, for 20 surgeons, it's not that we take in as a group at a time to train. It's not really feasible to have them sit at 20 Oculuses. So the Gear VR is perfect, you know. You just need to consider through your end group. And my final takeaway message is you have to go see Ready Player One, because this is what VR is going to be like in another 2 or 3 years, I'm sure. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. Thanks, James. Oh, sorry. Sorry, the mic is fine.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very interesting presentation.
Perfect.
Toronto-based company that addresses the problem of truly and accurately simulating surgical training in a VR in an operating room. He was recently one of 12 Irish entrepreneurs who won a place in a business bootcamp in Boston called Bridge to Mass Challenge Cork. So well done to him on that. And this evening, Brad is going to talk about how fully immersive VR is transforming healthcare training. So please give a warm welcome to Brad.
Thanks, James, and thanks to Donica for the intro. Donica is a legend in the simulation space in Ireland, and we're doing collaborations at the moment with TSSG and with Royal College, with Tyndall Institute, and every time we sit down with someone, the first thing they say, have you spoke to Donica first? Have you spoke to Donica? So thanks, Donica, and thanks, James, for the intro. And it was I was coming to the train yesterday. It was great doing a pitch where it's not investors, because in my sort of role at the moment, I'm asking for money all of the time and being told no most of the time.
So it was great to take out all the financial forecasting and the revenue forecasts and everything else and talk about something we as a company are incredibly passionate about, and that's building virtual reality-based environments for surgeons to train in. And we're using a software hardware solution, hardware being the simulator, providing the haptics using real surgical instruments, and the software piece being the VR element and the cloud-based element, and I'll speak a little bit about that in a moment. So just as a company, Marion Surgical, we were founded in 2017. We were in stealth mode for about 6-8 months before that, doing a lot of R&D and prototype development before we really launched. We have about 13 members now, Toronto, Cork, and we have now someone actually in the National College of Art and Design in Dublin working for us as well on some design work. We're hardware, robotics, and software developers in general. I'm neither of the above. I'm not a techie at all. I come from a business background, working with Dell, EMC, Accenture, and then went out on my own with our CEO to start this company and our Chief Medical Officer. We're a private investor funded. We're a HBSU client with Enterprise Ireland, and we launched our first simulator in May of this year in San Francisco at a urology conference there with our first customer, who is a blue chip medical device company who've taken us on board to build sims for them. So I'll play a little video which will sort of show you what we're all about, and I think there might be a bit of sound with this if it starts for me. So I'll sort of talk you through. So the surgeon walks up to the simulator, puts on the headset, has an option to choose the patient he wants to operate on, or he can actually upload a real case using DICOM images for an exact patient. So this is our virtual operating room. So these are the hardware haptics which provide tactile feedback to the surgeon. These are the real surgical instruments. That's a wire. So we have voice activation. We've taken sort of voice activation that the surgeon can talk to the system and move the C-arm by voice. And there's feeding a wire. And as that wire goes into the kidney in this example, the surgeon gets haptic feedback. So he feels the wire going through tissue, going through flesh, into the KLX of the kidney. So on completion, the surgeon gets a proficiency-based scorecard which tells him how he did based on a number of parameters like tissue damage and speed. So, I mean, James asked me to speak a little bit about sort of the future of immersive VR in healthcare, and it's such a huge subject, and actually Donica touched on a lot of it already, but I'm going to sort of focus on the right of the slide here and not ignore VR augmented rehabilitation, which is very much the physical use of VR in healthcare. And there's a huge investment in things like pain relief and on the neurological side of things. But in the surgical training environment, what we tried to do, we wanted to create a very realistic environment for a surgeon. And we wanted to say, while fully immersive, we wanted to go beyond audio, we wanted to go beyond visual and bring in touch. Because for surgeons learn by visual, but they learn by muscle memory. If they can't feel something, they don't learn as well. And simply providing visual training for them is great, but really in terms of the see one, do one concept that surgeons have, you have to provide feel. So we put a huge amount of R&D dollars into the hardware, which really was the primary prototype build for us. We got that right. We went out to surgeons around the world, we tested it, we had medical papers written on the system to say it was accurate, which allowed us to take it to market, which it has gone to market now. I wanted to give them a real immersive operating room so they felt they were in an OR when they were doing the procedures. And beyond that then we said, we don't just want to give them a static unit which has 10 ways of doing a case. We want to give them a cloud data set. We want them to be able to download cases from our cloud. So it's a unit of infinite possibility. The cases never end. We've got about 80 at the moment in our cloud just on kidneys alone. And a lot of our competitors have 10 or 15 when you buy the system. So you really can't complete the game when you're doing it as a surgeon. And I suppose when we started out on our sort of journey, we sat with surgeons, we wanted to build it with surgeons. So it wasn't us, none of us are surgeons. We have a chief medical officer now who advised us. we wanted to say, where is surgery going? So we sort of looked at the evolution of surgery over the last sort of 30, 40 years. And we said, we're really getting into this world of the IoT, connected devices, of intuitive dynamic hardware, of the opportunity to be selective in what you do in terms of training, individual patient data. So as we were building on the concept that our training should mirror how surgeons do procedures today, not how we think we should train them. And that was really the basis of everything that we do today, and we build things with surgeons. So just the unit itself, you saw a part of it there on the video. And I'll focus on the two yellow boxes. I spoke about the robotic haptics, so which is the right-hand side of the cart there, and that provides, as I said, as you feed a needle, a real needle in your hand in the real world into your virtual patient, you feel the pop of the skin. As you feed the wire down through the needle into the kidney, you feel the pushback on the needle as it goes through tissue and into the kidney. So it's really replicating pretty much exact tissue structure, simulated tissue structure within the virtual patient in front of you. We 3D print our instruments. So as we take instruments from people like Cook Medical and Boston Scientific to train, we 3D print them, we put sensors into them. So we can measure everything an instrument does. So we can provide really great data back to surgical device companies and how their instruments are performing. But we can also measure tool path very, very accurately and how a surgeon trains. And we have a proprietary algorithm which we built with out of Buffalo, New York, which our simulator can determine very, very quickly whether a surgeon is a trainee or an experienced surgeon, really within minutes, based on tool path and usage, based on the sensors we have in our tools. And the bottom left is the web app user login piece, which is our software. So we use real patient data. We provide a SaaS solution as part of our sale. You buy the cart and then you buy access to our cloud. So you can download cases for as long as you want to. And then we just charge that down on a user consumption basis. We have multi-user capability, so we can put a number of people into the OR at the same time, so we can do remote training. So we can have a surgeon, an experienced surgeon in Royal College, for example, doing a procedure, and we can have students around the world putting on a headset and walking into the OR or viewing it through the headset on what's happening. So it brings in huge capability for us in terms of remote training globally. But when we think of underdeveloped countries and training there where they don't have equipment, it's a really interesting space and one that we're already investing in and very passionate about. And most of all, surgeons love VR. We take our sim all around the world to medical events, and we have queues. It's not just because there's a headset there. Surgeons love tech, and especially the younger generation coming through at the moment, they really get into it. So it's a very easy sell for us, and surgeons really want to get involved. They like writing research papers. They like getting involved in VR and playing around with our stuff. So just very quickly, just sort of looking ahead, and I guess when I say big bets, this literally is what as a company we're investing in today as we take our R&D dollars and we say, what are we going to do for the next 5 years? Where do we think the industry is going? These are sort of our 5 key areas as a leadership team that we talk about and with our board and where we want to put the cash. It's a big market. I mean, the healthcare market in VR is estimated to hit about 5 billion in the next 7 or 8 years. In fact, I've seen that number doubled on occasion with some analysts, but something 5 to 10 billion. So it's a very big market for us commercially. But as we look ahead and say, what can we do with VR? What can we do with simulation? I mentioned multi-user VR and remote training from a training perspective, but with regards to surgical planning, this is a really interesting area for us. It's the ability to plan in advance of a surgery with surgeons all around the world and how you're going to do something. And there's examples of this. There's conjoined twins in the US last year, and there's a great video online if you get to see it of surgeons putting on headsets and essentially sort of walking through the heart of the conjoined twins to figure out what they were going to do as they separated. So it's really incredible stuff. Pre-op, post-op patient education. So again, we are invested in this at the moment of creating education sort of videos, but also being able to walk a patient through a procedure, pre-procedure. So showing them their real kidney in a 3D environment on a iPad screen or with a headset, spinning the kidney around, exploding it, showing where the kidney stones are, showing them where the tumor is, and talking them through really how we're going to do that procedure or how a surgeon is going to do that procedure. Same autonomous robotic innovation. Again, really interesting for us. We always think about surgeons training in a minimally invasive way on a physical patient, but robotic surgery is coming. It's coming really fast at the moment. Being able to train surgeons around the world in robotic surgery using our simulators, our headsets, and replicate it in a robotic way is a very interesting area for us. And we spoke to a couple of robotics companies around the world two of the largest about this, and so they're interested, and we're trying to figure out how we take that forward. Coming out of the surgery world, medical industry training. So when we first started doing this, we used to go into ORs and watch real surgeries. And going back a while now, in the ORs, you'd have a sales guy standing next to you. And the sales guy could be from Cook Medical, and he was there to look at it, to see how the instruments were working. So that's how they train, historically used to train these guys in the med device world, is to go and watch a surgery, see how the instruments work, then go and sell it. So med device companies really like the idea of being able to train on instruments and surgery using VR, and again, we're looking at that. And finally, the developing nations, and the ability for us to remotely bring in surgeon trainees from around the world in underdeveloped nations and train them using some of the top surgeons in the world. And we're working with a large VR headset provider, one of the largest in the world at the moment, in doing something in the underdeveloped nations in that area. And I think just finally, just an intro to the team, because again, I'm not the techie, so I'm not responsible for any of the success of any of this stuff really. But Ben is our CEO and CTO, he's based out of Toronto. Rajiv is our Chief Medical Officer, he's based out of Toronto. I'm based out of Cork. Our R&D team is mostly out of Toronto. We have a couple of people in, one guy in Nice, one guy in Strasbourg. And we have someone now in Dublin as well, just doing a bit of project work for us. So sort of well spread out. My background is certainly on a business side of things, and mergers and acquisitions, and a little bit of tech, but mostly the business ops side of things. So yeah, thank you. There's my contact details. I'll certainly be around for a while afterwards. It'd be great to speak to you if you have any questions. But yeah, thanks for listening.
Excellent. Thanks very much. I'm not too sure how I feel about that. Doing a VR flight through my own kidney, but if that happens.
Should be a lovely kidney as well. Thanks.
Why don't I use this one?
This one is good with the live phone.
I'm alive. Ah, that's not true. Do you want me to put it here? Better? Okay. Yes. But do you think for live we need to remove this? Maybe you put your logo or something.
Okay, folks, our next speaker tonight is Daria Yegorina, and I know a good few of you would have seen her demoing her products last year here at 3Dcamp and Irish VR as well. So Daria is the founder and CEO of Cleverbooks, who develop curriculum-based augmented reality solutions for education. Daria is also Dublin ambassador for Women of Wearables, and lately I've been finding it hard to keep track of her because she seems to be in high demand for speaking worldwide, really, the Middle East, America, UK, London, Manchester, so on and so forth. So it's great to have her here this evening. And she's going to talk to us about why AR in education has potential AR opportunities in education worldwide, and her experiences from the Middle East and North America. So please give a warm welcome to Daria.
So thank you very much, and I'm going to talk without any slides. I'm going to just share some experiences that I have in the AR sector in general, and also from my trips around the world. So maybe it will be useful for some of you who want to build some career in the AR field, and specifically in the education. So like James told, I'm specifically working in the augmented reality for education, and we're building the curriculum-based solutions for learning and teaching. They are combined of tangible products such as books, maps, or building blocks, because we're working in the primary school sector, and we empower the augmented reality. So before working on the solutions in general, we have done a lot of research, because for the educational sector specifically, and by the way, it's one of the most difficult to enter because of the lots of reasons. One of them could be the budget, well, another of them could be we're not techie, and so on and so forth. But I see still a lot of potential for the augmented reality in education sector. So you have seen here a lot of great examples about the medical education using AR and VR. And I think we need to start from the early ages. So why I think that way is because generation 31, like 30 plus, is the generation of digital immigrants. In the educational sector, there is the terminology of natives and digital immigrants. So everybody who is 30 plus, you are digital immigrants because you were growing up in the playing outside, you didn't need any mobile phone, when you are trying to meet a friend somewhere, you pretty much were going and waiting in that specific spot where you agreed to meet, and the friend was eventually coming. Where about now, and everybody who is younger than 30, they are natives, which means that they grew up already with some technology in their hands, and they will not understand and that massive gap that we currently have between digital natives and digital immigrants. So what I think is that currently we have, in the educational sector specifically, people who teach at the level they used to teach. They were taught at school, and they are teaching currently like it was 20 years ago and 30 years ago. Whereabout there is a collapse between the understanding and this cognitive dissonance when kid comes from school, takes a mobile device, and does whatever he wants to do with that mobile device. So what I think the potential for educational sector in general is to have the technology in school from the primary age. Kids are anyway exposed to technology and to mobile devices, and we need to teach them to use them in the proper way, and specifically for the education. And this is pretty much the analogy of we kids anytime they are outside, anytime they are crossing the street, but we need to teach them how to cross the street properly. So augmented reality is widely used in different subjects in education. So if we're talking, it could be used like for the same, like crossing the street. It could be used for any visual representation of anything you want for any subject that is needed to have visual representation. And the big opportunity for augmented reality is for representing massive amounts of information. So why I'm saying that is the information volume is pretty much growing year on year. And when I'm talking about that, I remember myself at school when I was at the history lesson and the teacher was telling us something, and I was sitting there and thinking like, oh my God, poor kids who are going to study history 10 years from now, because the information they're going to have to learn is actually becoming more and more because more events are happening. So the augmented reality is the visual representation of the information, and there is no easier way, for example, in the primary school, to show the kid what is the square pyramid if they've never seen that before or they don't have any experience. It could be done within 2 clicks. Or what is a tetrahedron or a sphere or anything, any shape in 3D that needs to be folded and unfolded and explained to the kids how it's done, literally in 3 seconds. So pretty much anything that could be visualized has a great potential for the educational sector. Also, I think like from technological point of view, the easier way you build the app itself and the easier way you represent it, it could be done with the standard devices that kids are having or teachers are having at schools, and there is no extra glasses or any technology needed for them to use it. So now talking about the landscape, I have still time? Okay, so talking about the landscape of the augmented reality generally in education. So it happened that I am traveling still the world in different conferences where I'm speaking and representing generally the potential of emerging technologies in education, and the kids need to be taught skills rather than specific professions like it was before, because the landscape of the professions is changing rapidly, and it is not possible to prepare the kids to be like I was asked at school at least, do you want to be a policeman, do you want to be a doctor, do you want to be a teacher, and you kind of select that profession and you are told what you need to do to go that way. So it's not possible to teach kids this way anymore, and we need to teach them skills. So with the help of technology, obviously. So this is something I'm delivering and at different conferences. And we see normally there is for technologies like augmented reality or virtual reality, or anything that is new, there are people who are following the cycle of early adopters, then those who accept all that, and so on and so forth. So the early adopters are those who are open to innovation pretty much, and I would say there are some concentrations in different countries, and I think it pretty much could be the mindset of people and the openness to try things, but early adopters are everywhere, obviously. So what I have found out, the majority of adoption of technology, and it might be also the case, like specifically in education sector and for the augmented reality, it is the North America. They are quite open to try and pilot test the solutions, and the majority of them are open to integrate that in the learning process. And also the Middle East, surprisingly enough, because Middle East, when I was meeting people from Middle East here, and they were telling like, oh, we think that Europe is so innovative and you have all the new modern technologies and everything new and interesting, and that we try to kind of come over here and get something new and learn and adopt in the Middle East. So I would say Middle East would be also quite open to the innovation and also in the education sector. So that was from my experience. And they are arranging a lot of events where they invite people to share the knowledge and experience in what they do, specifically in different countries, and in sectors of healthcare, in sector of education, so they can adopt and put that in practice in their countries. So if you have any questions, you're welcome to come over to me, and thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Carrie, and thanks to all our speakers for keeping to the time. So please do be open to the next part of the evening, ask us questions that I'm sure you have. So the second part of our evening, folks, is networking. It's food in a while, demos, and thanks very much to all the people who brought along some really interesting bits of kit and headsets to show you tonight. If you haven't tried those headsets, make sure to grab them, try them out. And
just a very quick announcement. There is a Conference Go Festival of Curiosity next Friday. Well, it's on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It's festivalofcuriosity.ie. And on Friday, myself, Niall Campion, and Amy Campbell will be speaking on the future storytelling mediums of virtual reality and augmented reality. So if you're interested in coming along to that, check it out. Thanks.
so I'm going to hop along to everyone who's doing a demo. Please put up your hands, and we'll just give you a few seconds to tell us what you're showing us tonight, who you are, please.
Hey guys, James, thanks for having us in. So I'm Johnny, I'm from MediaGround.io. We're just launching at our beta at the moment, but I'm here this evening to show you guys. This is the VR community in Ireland, in Dublin, so we're very much here to show you some hopefully new things. We've got 3 Live Focus with us here this evening. These are the first VR and AR headsets, so we're just moving away from just calling them headsets. We're here this evening just to show you wireless VR. So looking forward to showing you. Thanks very much.
Next demo. Where are you? Patrick? No, nothing tonight, Patrick.
Hi, I'm James at Products, and we are showcasing our new roller coaster experience called Roller Coaster Legends 2: Thor's Hammer. It was released on the PlayStation about a month ago. It's done so far done very well. It's a very exciting experience. I encourage you to check it out.
Thanks very much, guys. Cordell, is it?
Hi, I'm Cordell Hansen, and I'm here with Gareth Young from Maynooth University, and we are showing data artwork that was using open data sets together with the Dublin dashboard that is being built at Maynooth University. And what we were trying to figure out is how to represent qualitative and quantitative data in a sort of narrative storytelling way rather than just not a diagram. So we're here with the Oculus, so you can have a look.
Thanks very much, Cordell. So, Andy.
Hi folks, I'm Andy Sullivan from Liberty IT. I'm showing off a Roller City augmented reality game we built at AR Kit. We built it for the Coder Dojo Kudos projects. a couple of months ago, we built a show off to the kids there. So if you want to try out a really silly game, and but what we've also done, which is cool, we've open sourced it and we've written a really long, probably way too long tutorial. So I enjoyed that as well. Cheers.
He looks mad. I've seen it.
Hey, I'm Sean Thomas, I'm a game developer, and I'm going to be showing off a prototype for a horror game that I made for the HTC Vive.
Good evening. My name is Damien Mead. I'm a corporal in the Defence Forces. I develop military simulations. Currently collaborating with the Air Corps to build a search and rescue simulation. Just because I'm in the army, I don't fight, so don't be afraid.
Hi, my name is Stephen Sharkey. I'm a VR developer using the Unreal platform. So what I have here is a small architectural visualization demo, so it's kind of fun.
Thanks very much. Did I miss anyone? Oh.
Hey, I'm Pierce. I'm here with a few of us from 3Dcamp Dublin, and we'll be demoing Complete Anatomy, which is a medical app on iPad Pro. But come over, check it out. It's okay.
Thanks very much, Pierce.
So, last but not least.
Hello, I'm Phil. Oh, I'm nervous. What's that small startup company you are? Use Unity 3D. Or use Unity. Yeah, your production to the company's name. Thanks. Go over here and check us out.
News. Thanks very much. So that's it, folks. Have a great time for the rest of the evening. We're not going to have a formal close, so thanks again for coming. And we need to be moving along out here at around 9 o'clock. And I'll be told, in warned to say, please grab one piece of rubbish, a can or a pizza box with you, and do take it down to the recycling box. Thanks very much. Have fun.